Howdy, howdy. Hey, Tim, how's it going?
Hey, it's great out here in Boston. Finally got some rain.
You finally got some rain. Yeah, what's the drought here in San Francisco? So congrats to you, my friend. You guys get more than we do. We're
Yeah, I'm gonna get my daughter to bucket it up and send it out to you guys.
no, listen, tell her to, get my lawn. She needs to come help water my lawn. That's what I need. All right. This is so weird. I wanted to. Okay, there you go. Great. So good morning. Welcome to our volume Twitter Spaces, and we are volume finance, volume dot finance, and today is June 1st. Welcome to the first day of the last month in the second quarter, and it's a really exciting time. So we're super glad to have today's Twitter Spaces as part of our thought leadership series. And apologies to everybody who was looking at the prior Twitter Spaces link. Twitter makes it really hard to log out mobile, so I've been a little bit lost. But today's Twitter Spaces is about decentralized stablecoins. And should we try again? Decentralized stablecoins, should we try again? And we think we have still things about it. And today we have our special guest, Tim Swanson, who is at Clearmatics. You're head of market research, or what's your? I keep forgetting, Tim. You're in charge at Clearmatics, right?
I think most people think I'm like the CEO. I'm not. I'm head of market intel and also on the partnership side. I help lead that area as well.
Got it. So you're the CEO of Clearmatics. Good. No, sorry, that. I want to say, okay, cool, and we're super excited to talk about stablecoins today, Tim. So we're going to burn some time reviewing it. I want to say that why don't we start off? So before we jump into giving your background, I just want to tell folks, if you're reading this on transcript, it's also available on YouTube, and you should be able to join us and also follow us at volume.finance or twitter.com/volume5 FI. All right, so and my name is Tarek, and I'm the founder of Volume, and as well as one of the folks in the marketing and business development community teams here at Volume Partnerships. So we really are, you can think of Volume as a launchpad for protocols, blockchains, and dApps that focus on essentially cross-chain action, cross-chain. We say cross-chain development, but cross-chain transactions. Really excited about cross-chain transactions, and stablecoins are a very, very exciting piece of that. And we welcome Tim to join us. So with that, why don't we start off with Tim? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Actually, my background intertwines with how I've known you. Actually, we first corresponded about 8.5 years ago. Yeah, but we were on a mailing list, and I remember when my wife and I were just moving back from China, and we moved to California in the Bay Area. I reached out to you to ask you about a few things to clarify. I think it was about Mastercoin originally, and then that led to your whiteboarding of how Counterparty worked at the time. And I visited you in your office at the time, and you were very patient with me, explaining how the burning of the tokens worked and so forth. But that propelled me into writing some research reports and a couple of different books, and it's been a fun journey. And I do have to thank you for being a fantastic instructor to not just myself, but my own orbit. I think I've introduced you to quite a few people over the years, and so pretty excited to see where your latest project is going to go. So a quick background about myself. I got into this space completely by accident. As I've mentioned, I was in Asia for about 6 years altogether, and the last 5 of those were primarily in China, mainland China. And that last year I was in China, I was doing some hobbying mining, primarily around Litecoin. I did a little bit with Bitcoin, and no, I didn't make a ton of money or anything. So please don't hack my account or try to steal anything from me. Yeah, too late. But the genesis, I guess, the reason why people typically reach out to me nowadays, or at least in the past, about stable coins in general, is the company I work for, Clearmatics. When we first started in late 2015, or the company's been around since early 2015, but the project that we got off, we created and eventually spun out was something called USC, Utility Settlement Coin Consortia. It initially had about or started out with one bank, UBS, which is a large European bank. It's actually a Swiss bank, the largest bank in Switzerland. And over time, that consortia grew to about a dozen different large banks. And then got spun out 3 years ago to the month, June 2019. It became something called Finality, and it is still proceeding. Yeah. They raised $60-ish million from those banks to create. I don't like it being called the synthetic CBDC because that's not how it's not accurate. But in October this year, so just in about 4 months, they will launch a tokenized version of the pound. They are the first non-bank to have access to effectively a master account through they're not the only non-bank, but they're the first effectively fintech to have access to the master account with RTGS there. Right. And again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. That doesn't.
Slow down. You got to tell people what that means, because people won't understand what, being the first crypto company having access to their master account to create a crypto pound means. So come on, man. We're 3 years old. Explain just like we're 3. What does that mean?
Yeah. So about 70 central banks around the world, so primarily developed countries, operate what are called an RTGS, a real-time gross settlement system. And that's what actually processes payments in the background for settling any type of payment. Well, not any type, but most cash payments. And there's PVP, there's DVP, there's these different initials for what things get, where payments are actually settled. And traditionally, the only participants who have access to an RTGS are banks. So for example, in the US, the name of the RTGS is called Fedwire. And if you look at who participates in the Fedwire, it's banks, it's not non-banks. And we could argue about who should and shouldn't have access to it. My point here is the Bank of England has probably been the forefront of liberalizing who has access to theirs. And if you have a company that's interested in having access to it, you can submit some paperwork. I'm not promising you'll get it. I'm not at all involved in that process. But this project that we created starting in 2015 spun out to be its own baby, and now they're going to be adults with the launch of this project. So I'm not involved in that. I still talk to people involved in it just so I'm aware of what's going on. And wish them good luck and so forth. But the reason why people reach out to us is like, hey, that was the hard slog. You had to talk to central banks every day, because it wasn't just the Bank of England that they've been talking to, but the Federal Reserve in the U.S. and the Bank of Japan and ECB and so forth. So I definitely heard a ton of spiels, speeches, read lots of papers on the topic of actual collateral-backed stablecoins. I don't like calling them stablecoins. Typically, people get annoyed when I talked about pegged coins, because it's just, what is a peg coin? But traditionally in the cryptocurrency world, you have these this category of commercial bank-backed stablecoins. So like Tether, USDC, USD. These are effectively pegged coins. They're trying to peg the token one for one with an exogenous value, in this case, like a US dollar, $1. And we could argue about, which model is the best or whatnot. But anyways, the reason people reach out to me is because of the lineage, the company I work for, and because I've written quite a bit on this topic, including on the quote unquote algorithmic side or automated side. So happy to pause there and take some questions before I continue.
No, this is awesome. Great. But we still need clarity. So what you're saying is your where your interest and your sort of current context lies, and what you're seeing is you are actually have participated and collaborated companies that are launching what we would call the pound as a stable coin, a pound stable coin that is crypto based, but literally operating in the fiat rail system of the UK. Is that the takeaway that we should get from that description in terms of what you were describing prior?
So I don't think the Finality International guys would characterize it that way, because it's not a composable unit of account. Like it's not a public chain. It's going to be on a permission chain. It's going to be traded or used amongst those participants in the consortia. And I suppose they'll open it to wider access later on, but it's not, whereas you have a public chain like Ethereum and you have composable dApps and they can plug in with one another without any permission. It's just the opposite with what Finality is working with.
Right. Okay, so Finality is still on the non-permission side. Great. And so you've had exposure to there, and you've written some stuff on the on the permission side. Well, Finality's permission. We live, but we really are, and so maybe my question before we jump into the non-permissioned world is, they have struggled. So it is a struggle. It's a long time, but there is progress being made, definitely, in private-based stable currencies that are permissioned, but still being integrated into the fiat rail system. So the technology of the decentralized ledger or distributed ledger is creeping nonetheless in the permission space in traditional banking. Should that be the big takeaway here?
Yeah, that's worth saying. Yeah.
Perfect. Now that we've taken that away and we know that that's where they're going, let's now move into the non-permission world of stablecoins. And let's start off with algorithmic stablecoins. Could you define for us what is a non-permissioned or permissionless algorithmic stablecoin as you see it?
Sure. Sorry about the keys rattling there. So unfortunately, there's not a particularly great definition because of the nuances that have been implemented at the implementation side of things. So what I could do is I could tell by example. So you have two categories that we should split these quote unquote automated or algorithmic stable coins or peg coins into. You have both, in both instances, they're non-custodial, meaning in theory, no particular person or entity controls these coins, or at least has custody in theory. I say in theory because we'll see in practice that may not be the case. And we could separate these two into, we say, exogenous collateral, so collateral that backs up the stabilization mechanism or the coin or something that the peg token. So the exogenous examples would be something like DAI, because they rely on, they didn't initially do this. Initially it was just ETH backing it, but now it's multi-collateral, including USDC, USDT, wrap Bitcoin, and so forth. Fei protocol, Frax, and Liquidity. And Liquidity and DAI are kind of similar. They both use a CDP mechanism, a collateralization mechanism.
Flash forward, what's the CDP for the folks back home?
Yeah, so CDP is basically a mechanism to, I don't want to say flush out, but it basically allows you to collateralize your debt position. I believe that's the actual word for word for the initials. And it's most common form of algorithmic stable. Like I'm using finger quotes because I don't like that term, but it's the most common form because it's pretty straightforward. You basically lock up a particular coin to mint another one based on a particular ratio. It could be 60% of what you're collateralizing, you're able to borrow against or mint against. Like this quote unquote minting would be a US dollar. So like in Liquidity's case, it'd be LUSD. In DAI's case, it's actually something called DAI, which is supposed to be pegged to the US dollar. So we would say exogenous collateral examples, meaning these again are using collateral outside of the protocol to back up or provide some backstop to the peg. And then you have endogenous collateral stable coins. The two probably most well-known examples would be Terra and Celo, although there's nuances between the two. And what the idea here is endogenous is it's collateral basically created or owned by the protocol itself. So in the case of Terra, it would be Luna, UST, SDT, KRT, so forth. So again, I know it sounds unsexy and uninteresting, but there's a lot of brain power going into trying and flushing these systems out and battle testing them. And in the case of Terra, it completely blew up, despite the fact that there was plenty of folks who had across the spectrum who had pointed out, hey, this is probably not going to work for a HODL asset because you're incentivizing way too much demand for UST without having really any organic places to put it. Like the demand was solely based on of this thing called Anchor. But we'll pause there. I'm sure there's some more questions.
Yeah. All right. So let's reflect. We have two types: exogenous and endogenous. And the exogenous is essentially collateralized debt positions where you have to put up some form of non-protocol or external protocol collateral, like ETH for DAI. And because you put up ETH for 150 to 200%, you would then be able to mint DAI. And of course, as the price of ETH would go up or down, or if it goes down, you would have to add collateral to maintain your position, and if not, then your position will be liquidated. This was DAI and Maker, which has been around for some time, 3 or 4 years, that we have as your best exogenous example. And we talked about the endogenous example, which is where the collateral that is essentially used as the other side, where it was Ether for DAI. Now we in UST we used Luna, which was essentially the protocol of the Terra protocol. You know, Luna, which was a token of the Terra protocol that was used to essentially mint UST. Did we read you correctly in seeing these two classes of algorithmic stablecoin?
Yeah, that's a fantastic explanation.
Perfect. And then these are, of course, distinct and separate from the fiat-backed stablecoins, which we know as, of course, USDT, which is Tether, and USDC, which is Circle USD, in which for every dollar of this stablecoin minted, there is a fiat-banked version of the dollar sitting somewhere in a bank account or somewhere in some security backing that stablecoin. Are we correct?
In theory, it's supposed to be that way, but in practice, it's backed by other types of assets too, not just U.S. Treasuries or dollars in the bank.
Are you going to tell me it's backed by high risk jump bonds? Okay, but let's jump back into algorithmic stablecoins because that's where we want to point. So now the question is, let's now dig deeper back into the endogenous example. First of all, do we agree that UST was the most successful endogenous example, or do we agree that it was the biggest failure of all the algorithmic stablecoins? Which side do we take here?
I think it could be a bit of both. Like if we add an asterisk to that, so it's definitely the most well-known collapse. There's been other collapses before. In fact, if you just look up Señor shares on CoinGecko, there's like 24 that have attempted to build out, and virtually all of them have failed, except for I suppose Frax is the only one that's kind of left standing, and that's for a different reason. They're under collateralized, but it's the collateral that's there is primarily USDC, I believe. Terra also could be considered the biggest example of attempting to do some kind of adoption beyond just a kind of experimental, nerd types of folks. Like Rye is pretty neat, but you kind of need to be a little math whiz to try it out. And I'm not saying that to be any mean. I'm in contact with the guys there on a regular, or not on a regular basis, but I can follow them. So
whoa, slow. Whew. All right. Hold on now. You're going really fast. All right. So you said something just now which sparked an issue. So you said Rye was interested. What is Rye?
Sure. So Rye is a project that was launched a couple years ago. They basically tried to go back to the roots of DAI, where the ETH, the collateral backing this automated stablecoin called Rye, is only backed by a single bit of collateral called ETH. And that's exactly how DAI was set up a few years ago. But they effectively created, whereas a CDP system, whereas DAI uses a CDP system, Rye effectively uses a set of interest rates, redemption rates that are adjusted. And so their approach is different. And again, it's not that it's bad, it's just it's different. And so they're the only ones who've attempted to do it, and if you look at like numbers wise, they just haven't grown to the size of Terra. So that's why they're typically not discussed. Although, again, nerds like myself or JP Conning or a few others out there that do analysis on this will mention them because it's useful. In fact, Vitalik, he just posted a really good post 5-6 days ago, and he specifically talks about Rye. So if your listeners are interested in doing like some research, worth bringing this project into to focus as well.
Okay. Let's get back to UST being the largest failure. And we'll touch on a little bit about Rye, but let me reflect on Rye. So what we're seeing with Rye is that Vitalik says it's cool. You say that nerds like it. So therefore, we should all check it out. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, primarily because of the wind down. Like if there was going to be a collapse in
Whoa. What's the wind down?
Okay, so when you have pressure on these algorithmic stablecoins or automated stablecoins, whatever you want to call them, when you have sell-side pressure, to keep confidence in the token, you need to have something that either comes in to prop it up, some like open market operations to buy back from the sell pressure, or you need to start liquidating positions to make somebody whole somewhere. And like in a CDP, that's, they start liquidating folks. In RAI, they wouldn't see a wind down that you saw, or a spiraling, a downward spiral that you saw with UST probably couldn't happen even in the most extreme cases for RAI. That's not an endorsement of their model. I'm just saying, like,
but why? You're telling us why? Why would a run on the bank not happen with RAI?
So if you guys are interested in looking at some diagrams, in the middle of Vitalik's post literally has some, I'm looking at it right now, basically. Even if all demand for RAI disappears, you would still you'd have massive liquidations going through to the point where you would have the remaining RAI holders would be able to clear their own debt and still withdraw the ETH. So again, I'm not saying that's the best way to do it, but just these types of mechanisms that are supposed to keep people safe, or at least those who are unwilling to take massive risks safe. There's different ways to do it. They're not all the same. So I think that's why there needs to be nuance when people say, "Oh, all algorithmic stablecoins are failed." Not really. No, like there's ways to build. Like arguably, Terra could have survived if they didn't have Anchor, or if they didn't try to goose the incentive to borrow.
Right. So really, Terra's failure was really because of Anchor and offering 20% APR on essentially pledging your or sending your pledging your UST for 20% created a over imbalance of saving. There was too many people who were just dumping UST to save, and so you did not have enough people borrowing that UST to then do things in the Terra ecosystem. So what you're saying is that Terra wasn't even so much Luna. Sorry, let's be clear. UST as an algorithm stablecoin wasn't so much bad as much as Anchor was essentially just too much juice, too much fuel in the fire for people to hoard UST and cause an imbalance in the system, which eventually would lead to a loss in confidence in UST, a subsequent run on the bank, and of course a subsequent cascading effect on the system, from which the token could not recover. Am I reading you correctly?
Partially. I would say that Anchor was the major contributing factor, but fundamentally, if in the case of Terra, if UST ever outpaced the market cap of UST ever outpaced Luna, it doesn't matter what the APY was. It would assume the mechanism itself was not designed to be able to absorb that amount. The reflexivity is what Kevin Joe calls it. Like basically, it fundamentally needed Luna to grow faster than UST, and it did for the first year of launch, and then once Anchor really was starting being pushed to emerging markets and Y Combinator startups like that, that kind of stopped.
Hey! Don't back talk Y Combinator on this Twitter, okay? Just back off. It's a good program. As an alum, I'm not partial, but it's a good program. All right. So really, again, all you're saying was that the 20% APR as a marketing tool was what was at fault, because Luna could not keep pace with the demand for UST, and Luna was required to stay above, in terms of market cap, UST to keep this system in place. So it was a marketing problem that caused this, not juicing the system, not really the system itself being so badly designed. Is that what you're saying, or are you saying something else? Am I reading you incorrectly?
I don't think it was properly designed still, even without that. It didn't have, a priori, it did not have to lead in failure like it did. In fact, they knew from the beginning, hey, we have to create a mechanism to throttle an unbounded creation of UST. So every day, the protocol could only create X amount of UST. So that they knew that from the start. But that in and itself isn't going to protect it. What they needed to do is find some organic uses of UST that didn't involve or KDT or SDT, these other pegged coins that they had. In fact, if you look at the stats, the Korean won equivalent actually had much higher velocity than UST. UST basically had a velocity, I think it was like 1.5, if I remember. Basically, it just didn't flip hands throughout a day or a week, whereas the Korean won equivalent was like flipping 500 times faster. I forget the actual numbers. There's a website called Flipside Crypto that has a dashboard on that.
Correct. But we knew that was because Terra had Korean retail, using stable Korean won, in its system. Like there was sort of a payments rails for the Korean won. Am I not correct here?
Yeah, they had a fintech like there's an app called Chai, I believe it was pronounced.
Yeah, it was Chai.
But I don't know how much that was organic. I mean, there could have been a lot of goosing by a lot of different people. I'm just saying that from a metric standpoint, if we measure things based on velocity, the KDT was, we would say, healthier velocity than the USD.
Okay. All right, we're nearly out of time. Big takeaway from this is that algorithmic stablecoins, we should try again. And if you're going to try again, if you are going to try again, look at the RAI model as a possible good model to emulate. Is that our big takeaway?
I wouldn't say it's the right way to emulate.
Are you under pressure? What's the problem here?
No, I would say that there's other ways to attempt to diminish the store of value. Like we could have stabilized. Like if you look at money, the characteristics of money, you could have a unit of account that's stabilized and used as a medium of exchange, but is not used as a store of value. You just use it as a bridge currency for 30 seconds or a minute or 10 minutes or an hour or something like that. Like having to create a store of value without collateral or something that's under collateral is very, very tricky. And we keep on seeing these things blow up. So I think that there's still a set of experiments you could do, like if you add demarrage or however you say the French word, or negative interest rates, that could help disincentivize people to hodl. But
so
again, that's
punish the savers. God damn it, send them to hell. There is no room for you, saver. Get out.
Like there's a whole world of quote unquote stores of value or digital stores of value. You don't need to try and blow up retail by incentivizing some crazy marketing of 20%. So again, there's a whole other podcast we could do on what those numbers could have been. But yeah, check out RAI. It's not a bad place to start. And I wouldn't write off the whole mechanism or whole market. I think that's kind of disingenuous.
So we should try again, and we should make sure to be careful not to try to incentivize savings, because that's the path to destruction, and the path to imbalance. But we can make decentralized stablecoins work. There are models that are working. We should try again. Is that okay?
I would say let's find ways to disincentivize store of value. Don't push that at all.
Perfect. Don't juice that. Actually, that should be a little negative. You may want to demerge. You may want to create negative yields, but avoid the temptation to promote APRs for holding the stablecoin. You're only in a world of hurt. All right, Tim, thank you for chatting with us today. Thank you for giving us hope. I think all the folks in Twitterverse would love these words that you have spoken. And we would love to have you on again to chat. I know there's so much that we've shared here. Thanks for everyone who's joined. I know we don't have time for questions because that could take us another 30 minutes, but we'll definitely invite Tim again for another event. Thanks to all who joined. We are volume.finance. Check us out. And we look forward to seeing you in the Twitterverse and in the crypto Twitterverse as well. Have a great Wednesday. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye.